I was 8 months pregnant, standing in line at the grocery store, when the woman behind me loudly complained I was taking too long. The manager asked me to leave. Everyone stared. They had no idea I owned the entire shopping plaza. What happened next changed everything. If you've ever been judged by your appearance, stay until the end. This story will remind you why we should never underestimate anyone. And if this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button. You won't regret it. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late August, and the heat was unbearable. My feet were so swollen that I'd given up on real shoes weeks ago and was shuffling around in a pair of old sandals that had seen better days. My maternity dress, once a cheerful yellow, had faded to something closer to mustard after countless washes. I looked exactly like what I wanted to look like that day. Invisible, ordinary, just another struggling mom-to-be trying to make ends meet. The grocery store on Maple Street had been part of my childhood. I remembered coming here with my mother, counting coins to buy bread and milk, feeling the weight of poverty in every decision we made. Now, decades later, I was back. But this time, I wasn't the little girl watching her mother's hands tremble as she returned items we couldn't afford. I was someone very different, though you'd never know it by looking at me. I grabbed a cart and started shopping slowly, deliberately choosing the generic brands, clipping coupons from the circular by the entrance, doing everything a person on a tight budget would do. My back ached with every step, and my daughter, yes, I already knew she was a girl, kept kicking my ribs like she was training for soccer. I didn't mind. Every kick reminded me why I was doing this, why I'd spent the last 6 months quietly buying up properties in this forgotten neighborhood. The grocery store on Maple Street that day was long. There were only 2 registers open, and I could feel the frustration building behind me as I carefully placed my items on the belt. I had coupons, lots of them, and I was moving slowly, one hand supporting my lower back, the other fumbling through my worn purse. That's when I heard her. "Oh my God, seriously? This is ridiculous." The voice behind me was sharp, dripping with impatience. I glanced back and saw a woman in her 40s, perfectly styled hair, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, tapping her foot like her time was made of gold and mine was worth nothing. I tried to smile apologetically. "I'm sorry, I'm almost done." "You've been saying that for 5 minutes," she cut me off, loud enough that everyone nearby could hear. "Some of us have places to be. Maybe try organizing your coupons before you get in line." My face burned. The cashier, a young guy who couldn't have been more than 19, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I could feel every eye in that store turning toward me, and I knew what they saw. A broke, pregnant woman holding up the line, probably on food stamps, probably someone who didn't matter. "I'm doing my best," I said quietly, my hands shaking now as I tried to sort through the coupons faster. "Well, your best isn't good enough," the woman snapped. "This is exactly what's wrong with people today. No consideration for anyone else." I heard murmurs of agreement from somewhere in the line. My throat tightened. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to tell them all who I really was, what I'd accomplished, how I built a restaurant empire from nothing. But I stayed silent. This was exactly what I'd come here to see, how people in my old neighborhood treated those they perceived as beneath them. Then the manager appeared. Mr. Peterson was a heavy-set man with thinning hair and a permanent frown etched into his face. He'd been managing this store for at least 20 years, and clearly customer service had never been his passion. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. You're holding up the line, and we have other customers waiting." I stared at him, one hand protectively over my belly. "I'm almost finished. I just need another minute." "I don't think you understand," he interrupted, his voice louder now, performing for the crowd. "We have paying customers who've been waiting patiently. If you can't complete your transaction in a reasonable time, I'll have to ask you to leave and come back when you're better prepared." Paying customers. As if my money wasn't as green as anyone else's. As if my dignity was somehow negotiable because I looked poor. The woman behind me made a satisfied sound, like justice was finally being served. I looked around at the faces staring at me, some sympathetic, most just annoyed that their Tuesday afternoon was being inconvenienced by a pregnant woman who dared to use coupons. "Fine," I whispered, my eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. "I'll leave." Mr. Peterson nodded to the security guard, a young man who looked mortified but still gestured for me to follow him. I abandoned my cart right there, my carefully selected items left behind like evidence of my humiliation, and walked toward the exit with my head down. Behind me, I heard the woman say, "Finally, thank you." Someone laughed. I heard the distinctive sound of a phone camera clicking. By the time I reached my car in the parking lot, I was shaking, not with sadness, but with a white-hot clarity about what needed to happen next. You see, what none of them knew, what they couldn't have possibly guessed from looking at my faded dress and worn sandals, was that I was Victoria Chen Rodriguez. I owned 15 of the most successful restaurants in the state. I'd started with a food cart outside a factory, working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, building something from nothing because I'd grown up in this very neighborhood, and I knew what poverty tasted like. And 6 months ago, through a network of lawyers and shell companies, I'd purchased the entire Maple Street shopping plaza, the grocery store, the pharmacy, the laundromat, the sandwich shop, all of it. Every square foot of the place where I'd just been humiliated belonged to me. I sat in my car for a long time that day, my hands resting on my belly, feeling my daughter move inside me. I thought about the world I was bringing her into, and I made a decision. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about change. That night, I called my lawyer. Then I called my assistant. By morning, we had a plan. I'd bought the plaza for a reason that had nothing to do with profit. I'd grown up watching my neighborhood crumble, watching businesses close, watching people lose hope. My mother had worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford to feed us some months. I remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to be nothing in the eyes of people who had just a little more than you. When I made my first million from my restaurants, I promised myself I'd come back. Not to gentrify, not to push out the people who'd always lived here, but to lift them up. I'd been quietly assessing every business in the plaza for months, determining which owners genuinely cared about the community and which were just extracting what they could from people who had nowhere else to go. The grocery store had been on my watch list. Now I had my answer about Mr. Peterson's character. The next morning, I returned to that same store, but this time I wasn't wearing a faded maternity dress and old sandals. I wore a tailored navy suit, modified to accommodate my pregnancy, with proper shoes and my hair professionally styled. My assistant, Rachel, walked beside me, carrying a leather portfolio. My lawyer, Mr. Huang, followed behind. The difference in how people looked at me was startling. The same customers who'd stared at me with contempt yesterday now smiled politely, moved aside to let me pass. Respect, I'd learned long ago, was often just a costume change away. We walked straight to the manager's office. The same security guard who'd escorted me out yesterday now held the door open, his face confused, trying to place where he'd seen me before. Mr. Peterson was behind his desk, eating a sandwich when we entered. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption, then confused when he saw my professional entourage. "Can I help you?" he asked, standing up and brushing crumbs from his shirt. "Yes," I said calmly. "I'm Victoria Chen Rodriguez. I own this building." I watched the color drain from his face. What? Rachel opened the portfolio and placed the property documents on his desk. His hands trembled as he picked them up, his eyes scanning the legal text that confirmed his worst fear. "There must be some mistake," he stammered. "I report to Regional. They never mentioned—" "Regional doesn't own this property anymore," I interrupted. "I purchased the entire plaza 6 months ago through a private acquisition. The lease agreements transferred to me, which means, Mr. Peterson, you work for me now." He sat down heavily, and I could see him trying to process this information, trying to figure out if he'd ever done anything to offend me. He still didn't recognize me from yesterday. "Rachel," I said, "please show Mr. Peterson the security footage from yesterday afternoon, around 2:30 p.m. She pulled out a tablet and queued up the video. I watched Mr. Peterson's face as he saw himself on screen, speaking to a pregnant woman in a faded dress, telling her to leave because she was holding up paying customers. I watched his eyes widen as he realized that woman was me. "Oh, God," he whispered. I didn't know." "Exactly," I said softly. "You didn't know. And that's precisely the problem, isn't it? You treated me that way not because of anything I'd done wrong, but because of how I looked, because you decided in an instant that I didn't matter." He opened his mouth to defend himself, but I held up my hand. "The woman behind me in line, the one who was so impatient, so cruel, I looked her up in your employee records. Diane Harrison, your assistant manager." Mr. Peterson's face went from pale to green. "She's been with us for 12 years. She's usually very professional. Is she? Or is she professional with people she perceives as worthy of her professionalism? There's a difference, Mr. Peterson." The room fell silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I let him sit with his fear for a moment, let him imagine all the ways I might punish him for yesterday's humiliation. But revenge wasn't what I'd come for. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, sitting down across from him. "I'm investing $500,000 in renovating this store. New equipment, better inventory, a complete refresh. But there are conditions." He leaned forward, desperate now. "Anything, whatever you want. First, every employee in this store, including you, will complete comprehensive sensitivity and customer service training. I don't care if they've been here 20 years or 20 days. Everyone participates, no exceptions." He nodded frantically. "Yes, absolutely." "Second, we're implementing a new policy. Every customer who walks through those doors is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of how they're dressed, how slow they move, or how many coupons they use. Because you never know someone's story, Mr. Peterson. You never know what battles they're fighting or who they might be." "I understand," he said quietly, and I could see genuine shame in his eyes now. "Third," I continued, "I'm creating a community fund. Any customer facing financial hardship can apply for assistance with their groceries. It'll be managed by a third party to protect privacy, but this store will be the distribution point." Mr. Peterson was writing all of this down, his hand shaking slightly. "And finally," I said, standing up, "Diane Harrison has a choice. She can embrace this new direction, undergo the training, and help me build something better here, or she can find employment elsewhere. But if she stays, she'll be reassigned to a new position, Community Outreach Coordinator. She'll work directly with customers who need extra help and support." "I'll speak with her today," Mr. Peterson promised. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "I grew up in this neighborhood, Mr. Peterson. I know what it's like to be treated as less than human because you're poor. I built everything I have from nothing, and I came back here because I believe this community deserves better. Don't make me regret giving you a second chance." 3 months later, after my daughter Elena was born, I returned to that grocery store. The transformation was remarkable. The exterior had been repainted, bright and welcoming. Inside, the floors gleamed, the shelves were fully stocked, and the staff wore cheerful uniforms and genuine smiles. Mr. Peterson saw me coming and hurried over. His whole demeanor changed. "Miss Chen Rodriguez, welcome back, and congratulations." He peeked at Elena sleeping in her carrier. "She's beautiful." "Thank you," I said, genuinely pleased by the changes I saw. "The store looks wonderful." "It's not just the store," he said proudly. "Our community fund has helped 43 families so far, and Diane," he gestured to where the woman who'd been so cruel to me now stood helping an elderly man load his groceries, "she's become our most passionate advocate. The training really changed her perspective. She actually started a support group for young mothers in the neighborhood." I watched Diane for a moment, saw the care with which she treated the elderly customer, and felt something shift inside me.
This was why I'd come back, not for revenge, but for redemption, for the neighborhood, for the people who lived here, and maybe even for myself.
Over the next year, the ripple effects spread throughout the plaza. The bakery started hiring from the community fund's job training program. The pharmacy began offering free health screenings. The laundromat became a gathering place where people could access social services and support. Local news eventually caught wind of the changes, running stories about the mysterious benefactor transforming Maple Street. I never confirmed my involvement publicly. The work was what mattered, not the recognition. But the real test came one afternoon when I was shopping with Alina, now a busy 1-year-old who thought grocery stores were designed specifically for her entertainment. I was in the produce section when I heard a familiar sound, a sharp voice, dripping with impatience. "Maybe if you weren't on your phone, you could move faster," a well-dressed woman was saying to a young pregnant girl who couldn't have been more than 20, who was clearly struggling to reach items on a high shelf. I felt my protective instincts flare, but before I could intervene, Diane appeared. "Excuse me," she said firmly to the rude customer, "but we don't speak to people that way in this store. If you can't treat others with respect, I'll have to ask you to shop elsewhere." The well-dressed woman sputtered, shocked. "Do you know who I am?" "I don't care who you are," Diane replied calmly. "Everyone in this store deserves dignity. That's our policy, and I enforce it." The woman left in a huff, and Diane turned to the pregnant girl with a warm smile. "Let me help you with that. Are you doing okay? Do you need anything else?" I watched the girl's eyes fill with grateful tears, and I saw myself in her. Young, scared, struggling, invisible to most people. But not here, not anymore. As Diane helped the girl finish her shopping, Mr. Peterson approached me, Elena reaching for his offered finger with her tiny hand. "We have a job opening next week," he said quietly. "Diane already talked to that young woman about applying. We've partnered with the community center to provide childcare for our employees." I smiled, bouncing Elena gently. "That's wonderful, Mr. Peterson." "It's all because of what you did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You could have destroyed us after how we treated you. Instead, you gave us a chance to be better. I think about that day every single morning when I come to work. It changed everything for me." I looked around the store, at the customers being treated with kindness, at the staff who took pride in their work, at the community coming together in a space that had once been marked by judgment and division. "We all deserve second chances," I said softly, kissing Elena's head. "And we all have the power to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. That's the world I want her to grow up in." As I left the store that day, I whispered to my daughter, still too young to understand, but old enough to feel the love in my voice. "Never forget where you came from, baby girl, and always, always stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Because you never know, the person everyone else overlooks might just be the one who changes the world." This story is a reminder that we all have the power to lift others up or tear them down. Choose kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, the person you judge today might just be the angel you need tomorrow. Thank you for watching.